A conversation can begin with one small fact. You said you would call, and you didn't. That joke embarrassed me. We agreed on this, and it happened again. But 10 minutes later, the fact has disappeared. Now you're explaining that you are not controlling, not ungrateful, not too sensitive, and not trying to start a fight. This is one of the most exhausting shifts in a relationship. You entered the conversation to solve a moment. You leave it trying to prove that you are a decent person. Imagine that someone promised to handle an important task and forgot. You say, "I needed you to follow through." They answer, "So now I am unreliable?" You clarify that you were talking about this one promise. They say, "You always make me feel like a failure." Or you say, "That comment hurt me." They answer, "I was joking. Why do you assume I wanted to hurt you?" Suddenly, the question is no longer whether the comment had an impact. The question is whether your interpretation proves that you were unfair.
Notice what changed. You named a behavior. The reply judged your motive, your personality, or your view of the other person. A verb became an adjective. Something they did became a debate about what kind of person you are. I used the phrase motive trial for this shift. It is not a clinical diagnosis, and one defensive reply does not prove manipulation. It is simply a useful name for a conversation in which the original event cannot be examined until the person raising it first proves innocent intentions. The burden of proof quietly moves. Instead of asking, "Did this happen and what did it cost?" the conversation asks, "Are you allowed to be upset? Did you ask perfectly? Do you secretly think I am a bad person? Can you guarantee that your tone contained no frustration?" Those questions can sound reasonable in isolation. Intentions do matter. Tone matters. Context matters. The problem is sequence. If all of them must be settled before the event can be acknowledged, they become an escape route from the event.
There is a human reason this happens. A complaint about behavior can feel like a verdict on identity. When people hear evaluation instead of description, they often become defensive. Their attention moves away from the problem and toward protecting a picture of themselves. I am caring. I am competent. I am not the villain here. Communication researcher Jack Jibb described this difference decades ago. Evaluative climates tend to produce defense. Descriptive, problem-oriented climates make cooperation more possible. Compare, "You never care about me," with, "When the plan changed and I did not hear from you, I waited for 2 hours and felt unimportant." The second version is not magically conflict-free. The other person may still feel criticized, but it gives the conversation somewhere concrete to return to. A plan changed, no message came, and someone was left waiting. This reveals an important distinction. Intention and impact are not rival explanations. "I did not mean to hurt you" can be true. "Your hurt" can also be true. Healthy conflict can hold both facts without using one to erase the other.
A defensive conversation treats intention like a courtroom verdict. If the harm was not deliberate, the harm is declared irrelevant. A responsive conversation treats intention as context. It acknowledges the effect first, then uses intention to understand how the mistake happened and how to prevent it next time. Once your motives are on trial, over-explaining feels like the obvious defense. You add timestamps, background, qualifications, and every gentle thing you said before the difficult sentence. You explain what you meant, what you did not mean, and what you would have said if you had known it would be received this way. You hope that enough detail will close every possible misunderstanding. Instead, every new detail creates another surface to argue about. The conversation expands while the original event gets smaller. This is why some arguments last for hours and still feel strangely empty. A lot was said, but the central question never received an answer. The length of the conversation creates the illusion of depth while both people circle the same missing point. Over-explaining can also become a form of self-erasure. You start editing your memory to make your complaint more acceptable. Maybe it was not that serious. Maybe I asked badly. Maybe I should not have needed anything. The goal shifts from describing your experience to becoming impossible to criticize.
Then a second pattern can appear. One person pushes harder because the issue has not been answered. The other withdraws or defends more intensely because the pressure feels like attack. Researchers often describe a related cycle as demand and withdraw. Each move makes the next move more likely. This matters because it prevents a simple hero and villain story. The person raising the issue may become sharp, repetitive, or global. The person defending may genuinely feel flooded. Both can contribute to escalation, but escalation does not make the original event disappear. It creates two issues that need to be handled in sequence. First, what happened and what impact did it have? Second, how did we talk about it and what made that conversation unsafe? Combining those questions into one moral verdict almost guarantees that neither gets resolved. You can take responsibility for a harsh tone without surrendering the event. I should not have called you selfish. I want to repair that. I also still need us to talk about the promise that was broken. Both statements can stand.
So how do you distinguish a difficult but repairable conversation from a recurring motive trial? Do not judge one sentence. Watch what the conversation does after defensiveness appears. Good faith conflict can wobble and still return. A repairable response might sound like this. I felt accused and reacted, but I can see that I changed the subject. You were asking about the plan, so let us go back to that. The important part is not perfect language. It is the return. Relationship research often describes responsiveness through three experiences: feeling understood, validated, and cared for. Validation does not mean agreeing with every conclusion. It means showing that the other person's experience has been accurately heard and is worthy of a response. Experimental work on invalidating feedback has found that it can increase emotional and physiological threat responses and reduce social engagement. That helps explain why telling someone they should not feel what they feel rarely makes a conflict calmer. The nervous system hears dismissal before the mind hears logic. 3 tests can make this practical. First, can the other person restate what happened and why it affected you without adding a judgment about your character? Not you were hurt because you are insecure. Simply, you expected me to call, and when I did not, you felt abandoned in the plan.
Second, can they separate intention from effect? I did not intend that result, and I understand that it happened. If those 2 clauses can share one sentence, the conversation no longer needs a winner. Third, can they offer one observable next step? Not, I will try to be better. Something you could actually recognize? If the plan changes, I will message before the agreed time. If I need a pause, I will say when I'm coming back to the conversation. These 3 tests create a simple sequence. Describe the event. Acknowledge the impact. Explain intention without using it as an eraser. And agree on a visible change. The sequence is more important than any perfect sentence. If the conversation keeps drifting into a trial of your motives, use a boundary that is short enough to survive pressure. I am willing to talk about my tone. First, I want us to finish the issue I raised. Or, I am not asking you to agree with my interpretation. I am asking you to respond to what happened.
Then stop adding evidence. A boundary loses its shape when it becomes another 10-minute defense. If the other person refuses to return, the refusal is information. It does not tell you everything about the relationship, but it tells you what this conversation can currently hold. Look for a pattern, not a dramatic peak. Everyone becomes defensive sometimes. The deeper problem is a relationship in which every complaint repeatedly becomes evidence against the person who raised it, while the original behavior remains permanently beyond examination. Over time, that structure teaches you to distrust your own experience. You rehearse simple requests. You collect proof before speaking. You measure every word for possible prosecution. The cost is not only exhaustion. It is the gradual belief that your feelings become real only after someone else approves them. A healthy relationship does not eliminate defensiveness. It knows how to come back from it. The next time an argument starts expanding, listen for the moment a behavior becomes a verdict on identity. Then return to the smaller, harder question. What happened? What did it change? And what happens next?